Nicky Hopkins was arguably the greatest piano session player of all time, and I want to start this video about him by quoting Ray Davies of the Kinks. He says, "Nicky, unlike lesser musicians, didn't try to show off. He would only play when necessary, but he had the ability to turn an ordinary track into a gem, slotting in the right chord at the right time, or dropping a set of triplets around the backbeat, just enough to make you want to dance. On a ballad, he could sense which notes to wrap around the song without being intrusive." I want to start with probably my favourite part of his, and that's the piano on Jealous Guy by John Lennon. And what's really distinctive about this piece is Hopkins's use of parallel sixths. Now, he uses these so much in his playing, and sixths are just intervals of a sixth, going up or down. Now, here are the sixths. And the sixths are really bright because they have so much space between them. They're not muddy like chords would be. And they really ring out nicely, and he can play them effortlessly. So it's obvious he has practiced his scales and he has these things in his fingers from all his classical training. That little sequence is also involving sixths, but he adds an extra note underneath from the scale. And then more sixths. And when he does that, he actually lands on the D7 by ascending upwards in sixths, hitting the seventh of that D7, which was really nice. More sixths. Now, in Oh My Love by John Lennon, he uses a series of parallel thirds. And thirds are basically an inversion of a sixth. So if this is a sixth, F sharp and D, the inversion is D and F sharp. And sometimes he uses the sixths and the thirds interchangeably. So in Oh My Love, John Lennon is playing this down low. And then Nicky Hopkins plays this on top on an RMI Electrica piano from the 1970s. It really sweetens up that whole sequence, and it's still unintrusive. Another John Lennon song that Nicky played on is Oh Yoko. And so what's going on here is a broken chord on a D flat, and then A flat over C, and he just adds that sweet little sixth, and then he does a slip note from C to D flat, creating the B flat minor. Next, we've got Sympathy for the Devil, and Nicky holds this whole thing together with his piano playing. He is playing the equivalent to the rhythm guitar here. This is real rock piano stuff, and it's quite simple what he does, but really effective. So he starts off with just E, D, and A, and that's the whole song really, except for the B in the chorus. Throughout then what he's doing is sus chords. So E, E sus, back to E, D, D sus, and then occasionally doing the A sus as well. And then he builds up the rhythm. And you can hear his classical chops on She's a Rainbow by the Rolling Stones. It sounds like this. Just metronomic and really, really suits that song. It just gives it such a bright, positive feel from the start, matching the lyric of She's a Rainbow. There's something really magical about that. And on Angie, he uses this slip note chord technique, which I'm going to show you. So the sequence is like this. He does this little slip chord, kind of like Floyd Kramer. So Floyd Kramer would do things like this. The ring comes from playing the fifth of the chord, and then you play the second to the third. But what Nicky Hopkins does is he makes more of a chord of it. So he plays the slip note, but then he ends on the tonic, and so it sounds like a triad. And he does it on minors too. And so that's what he's doing in Angie. Okay, at the start he does that, and then up high he completes the chord. And then for the E, lovely. And then he does a kind of a sixth version of it, so using a sixth, and then F sus to F, and then a plagal cadence. So he just does a C down to the A minor, 2 steps down, little sequence. Really gorgeous on that song. And there's great honky-tonk piano on Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks. Now, the intro is very effective, quite simple, but it's just like this. And that repeats. It's just D minor to A7 and that descending bass line. And then coming into the chorus, it does this. And on the recording, it's so subtle, they have it really down low in the mix, but it actually makes the whole thing work. Nicky Hopkins also played on Revolution by the Beatles. And you might recognize this part. The part is where John Lennon is singing, all right, all right, all right. It's in B flat. I'll put some chords behind it so you can get a sense for it. And then he's doing some bluesy licks. And then into the F. He can also play a killer ballad like on Joe Cocker's You Are So Beautiful. Here is the intro. And it slows just before it comes in. So he adds a 9 to that first A flat with a big deep chord. That's a big chord. and just moves one finger for the A flat major 7, and then the A flat 7, and then into D flat major 7, and then this beautiful G flat 9 chord. Look at how big that chord is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes, and then he plays the melody line on the bottom for this little sequence with his thumb. So, there's a lot going on there. So you might wonder, well, what has Nicky Hopkins got over players like, let's say, Paul McCartney or John Lennon of the Beatles? Well, it's the breadth and depth of his experience, really. The time spent at the piano, his classical training, the fact he knows the thirds and sixths, as we've seen, the voicings, and just the fact that all the styles are under his fingers. He doesn't just dabble in honky-tonk blues country. He knows them intimately. He's played hundreds and hundreds of pieces from sheet music. He's absorbed the style. He knows it intimately, and it shows. And this, along with an uncanny instinct for just knowing what the perfect part should be, as well as a gift for melodic lines, makes him the perfect piano session player for me. If you need the correct fingering for all these scales, you can download my handy finger guides from my store. The link is in the description. I've got major scales, minor scales, blues scales, also chords and arpeggios. They'll print in seconds and will give you instant results.